Okay, I hope everyone's doing well today. So we got the top of the hour. Let's go ahead and start up. So first of all, my name's Ted Pattison. I work at Critical Path Training. And first thing I want to do is just promote the free webinar series that we have. So if we go to our website at criticalpathtraining.com, click on that one particular link, and that will get you to the page that has a listing of some upcoming seminars that we have. I'll go ahead and click on this link right here, and what you can see is that today we've basically got upgrading, configuring SharePoint Search, a very deep SharePoint on-premises and SharePoint online IT topic. We have developing custom visuals in Power BI, so I'll be talking about the new model for creating custom visuals with TypeScript and JavaScript, things like that. Some of the things we have in the past are viewable as YouTube recordings inside there, so please feel free to look at those. Quick word about some of our courses. If I go down and look at our courses page right here, you know, Matt is a specialist in SharePoint, and so his SSC 2016 class, SharePoint 2016 Administrator Survival Camp, might be something you're interested in. We have some other developer topics. We're doing a lot of work with Power BI. If I go to our schedule right here, let me just point out that there's one delivery that Matt has. It is a 5-day deep dive into installing and administrating SharePoint on premises using either SharePoint 2016 or 2013. We have December class. We just have 3 or 4 seats left for that particular class. There's also one in February, and you're over the 90 days ahead of class, so there's still a 30% discount if you wanted to jump in and look at that. One other administrative note before I hand over to Matt is I'm going to go to github.com/criticalpathtraining. So what we're starting to do more and more is to take our courseware, and especially the electronic student files, and add them into repositories in GitHub, so they're easy for our students to be able to find, download. It's easy for us to be able to update things. You know, for instance, if I look at the Power BI, PBI 365, and I go to the student folder, and I go into modules, here's all the different modules, and what we've done now is just to take our labs and put them online. You know, so if you want to go through a couple of the labs as a try before you buy, or just to basically work on your own, you know, we invite you to do that, and if you like the labs there and you want to come get some hands-on training, that would be great. Okay, so that is my marketing spiel. Now what you came for is Mr. Matthew McDermott. Let's go ahead and switch over to Matt, and I'll let you take it away.
All right, thanks, Ted. Hope everybody's doing well this morning. I'm grateful for you guys to log in and catch this live. Like I said, or like Ted said, we will have the recordings available later, and this slide deck plus the scripts that I'm demonstrating, I'll package those up, and you'll get an email at the end that thanks you again for attending and taking time with us, and it'll have a link to where to download the deck if you're interested. As Ted said, I'm an instructor for Critical Path. I'm also a consultant. I work in SharePoint and Office 365. That's kind of my job. I'm a SharePoint MVP, and if you're interested in following me on Twitter, I'm at @MatthewMcD. If you have any questions after the class, well, during the class, we've got the question and answer queue, and I will do my best to keep an eye on that. But if you have questions afterwards, please feel free to email me at matthew@aptalon.com. I'm more than happy to answer questions about the content in the class or about the content in our admin or building business solutions classes. And then a lot of what I talk about, a lot of what I present is available on my blog, which is at aprilblue.com/blog. So that's a little bit about me. Let's, for this session, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking a SharePoint 2013 environment, the search environment specifically, and we're going to move that to SharePoint 2016. Before we get going, the first big question that you should be asking yourself is, should you upgrade or not? A lot of companies struggle with this notion of, does it make sense for us to upgrade our SharePoint stuff? And it's a much larger question, but primarily when we talk about doing an upgrade, what we're really talking about doing is taking an existing SharePoint 2013 environment, the content, and then using out-of-the-box SharePoint tools and processes to convert the schema of the content and the service applications into a format that's compatible with SharePoint 2016. So when I say upgrade, this is what I'm talking about, using the out-of-the-box tools and coming from SharePoint 2013. If you're looking at migrating, this is where you're going to be copying or moving content from any previous version of SharePoint, and potentially not only taking that to SharePoint 2016, but also looking at taking that to Office 365 and SharePoint Online. And generally that process is facilitated by third-party tools because you're doing a lot more moving of the data, you're twisting things around, and the out-of-the-box SharePoint tools don't do that quite so well. So what we're talking about today is an upgrade. And when you begin to look at the upgrade process, that's where you start to have questions about, should we be doing this at all? Should we be migrating instead? And while it is possible to migrate the search settings and search configuration, today I'm going to show you how we can upgrade it, because the tools, out-of-the-box tools for upgrading search are actually quite good. The method that we're going to use is commonly known as database attach, and this is the same approach that you'll use for upgrading your content in SharePoint 2016. So you're going to create a SharePoint 2016 farm, and that could be 3, 4, 5 servers, and then you're going to create a configuration database, and that configuration database is new. We're not going to upgrade a 2013 config DB. Then we connect all of the other servers to that farm. And we'll have a slide a little bit later about the details of that kind of connection. Then you're going to back up your SharePoint 2013 databases, and you're going to restore them to potentially a new SQL server. You don't have to. You can restore them to the exact same SQL server or a new instance on the same SQL server. Of course, if you're going to restore it to the exact same SQL server, that's where you want to be really careful about your database names, because it's super easy to overwrite existing data with those backups. So here are our fictional 5 databases that we're going to upgrade. Then you're going to test the databases, and you run a commandlet that does that test and verifies that everything's ready to go and the content is ready to be upgraded. Then you upgrade the databases by attaching them in the place of content databases, like for your web applications where your team sites would be stored. You simply attach them to the web application, and that mount commandlet will upgrade the content. For service applications, it's a little different. What you're going to do for some of the service applications is you're going to create a new service app referencing the 2013 service application database. In the case of search, it's totally different. Then you're going to test your results. So essentially that is the structure and steps for performing a SharePoint 2013 to 2016 upgrade. What you have to do when you build that SharePoint farm, when you build your 2016 farm, is you have to create the new farm by creating the configuration database, and then build out the structure of your farm with new service applications. These would be the service applications that you do not intend to upgrade. So these would be some of the new service apps or some service apps that just don't need to be upgraded, like the Word automation service, Visio services, things like that. Then you're going to create empty web applications. These will be the web applications that ultimately you're going to connect your content databases to. You can create them with or without a database using PowerShell, but then you're not going to create a root site collection, because of course when you bring over your 2013 content, the 2013 content will take the place of those the existing web applications, and it will start to run. So you also have to consider the things that cannot be upgraded. For example, Excel Services is removed from SharePoint 2016. It's now being served by Office Online Server. So you have to have a plan for that, and you have to test for that. There's also service applications like the Work Management Service that no longer exist in SharePoint 2016. They've been removed from the product. So understanding what your options are, understanding what's different about SharePoint 2016 is very important. But in our case, what we're going to do is focus on the service application upgrade. So before I get into the service application upgrade, let me give you just a quick walk around of the farm that we're going to upgrade. So there's a few things going on here. First of all, this is a SharePoint 2013 farm. It's our legacy farm. And we're using the URL http intranet.doghousetoys.com, and our search site is under a search managed path. What this means is that any searches that I do, they're going to stay in this site collection. And I have a typical SharePoint, sort of a typical SharePoint search environment. I've got refinement working. I've got my my thumbnail previews working here, and I've got people search. You know, I've got all of the things that you're used to seeing in your SharePoint environment, and then I have a custom refiner, or I should say a custom vertical, search vertical for my customers here. And there are no SharePoint customers in there, but there are a bunch of pet stores. And so inside here, inside this search site collection, I have the visualization set up with some custom refiners. So these are custom display templates. This one here, this pet store customer, is using a custom display template, and I'm actually calling out to Bing here. So I've invested in creating a search experience in 2013 that I don't want to have to recreate. So in my case, it behooves me to upgrade. So what I've done is I've backed up the content database that includes my intranet and my search center, and I've gone ahead and prepared that for a content upgrade in SharePoint 2016. Now in central administration, when I go into my service applications, I've also have a search service application, and this is the search service application that we're going to upgrade to SharePoint 2016. So in here is my enterprise search service application. If I go into the search service application and I look at my content sources, I have a bunch of content sources. And there's our customers BCS content source, and here's our local SharePoint sites content source, but you'll just pay attention to this part, because this is what we're going to see in our upgraded content and our upgraded service application. So the other thing I've got is to support that custom visualization in the Search Center, is I also have in my search schema, if I look at my managed properties, and I look at managed properties that start with DHT, which is the short name of my Doghouse Toys company, you'll see that I have a bunch of custom managed properties. So because of this investment in search, it makes sense for my company to go ahead and perform a full search service application upgrade. So let me close that connection and do a little bit of switcheroo in the background here, because I need to shut down that farm and get my other farm ready to go. So let's do save there. Okay. So when we're talking about doing a service application upgrade, you have to consider that not all of the service applications are the same. So each one is going to require a subtly different approach to how you perform your upgrades. And the order that you perform the upgrades matters. In our case, we're using the Managed Metadata Service, and the Managed Metadata Service is used by the User Profile Service. So we're going to upgrade the Managed Metadata Service first, and then we're going to upgrade the User Profile Service. We also have Secure Store Service definitions, or called target applications, that are in place in 2013. So we're going to also upgrade the Secure Store Service, and we also have external content types. That external content type that I showed you that was the customer line of business crawl, that's coming from the BCS, and the BCS is using the Secure Store Service, so let's upgrade those in that order as well. And then finally we're going to upgrade search. So some service applications require even more care and feeding. And if you're using the App Management Service and you're doing SharePoint apps, or if you're using the App Management Service along with Access Services in SharePoint 2013, then there's a little bit of extra work that you have to do to make sure that those upgrade correctly. When it comes to the Search Service application, some good reasons to upgrade the Search Service application are to preserve all of the search settings that you've created in central administration. So these would be the content sources that I showed you. If you have custom crawl rules and custom managed properties, that's a reason to upgrade your Search Service application. Also remember that sites and site collections can have their own search settings, much like having the managed metadata service being used by your site collections. And those settings, even though they're referenced in the site collection, those settings are stored in the search databases. And so if we don't upgrade them, our end users are going to lose content from their SharePoint 2013 sites. Now there are a few things that don't come along with it. One of them is that the topology of your search service application is not preserved. So if you have a 4-server or 5-server farm and you have search scaled out across all of those servers in SharePoint 2013, it doesn't matter. When you move to SharePoint 2016, you're going to get a default topology, and you'll see this in the demo in just a moment. You'll get a default topology of a single server. And then it's up to you to modify that topology to match your requirements for your new SharePoint 2016 servers. The other thing that's not preserved is a custom thesaurus file. If you're using a custom thesaurus file in 2013, it's trivially easy to apply that same file to SharePoint 2016. You'll do that after you configure search. It's just 3 lines of PowerShell and you're back up and running. But you should know that if you are using one in 2013, that you'll need to transfer that to your SharePoint 2016 environment. It's not preserved. So what about new search limits? We're in SharePoint 2016, so let's see the exhaustive list of everything that's new in SharePoint 2016 Search. There it is. That's the list. Of all of the published boundaries and limits, the only one that's different in SharePoint 2016 is we can now put twice as many items per index partition. So this number was 10 in SharePoint 2013. We now have 20 million items per index partition in SharePoint 2016. Okay, so what does a search service application upgrade look like? Well, what I did, because this can take some time, is I went ahead and videoed the whole thing so that it will be a lot more efficient in terms of time. And I'll just walk through how this goes. So what we have initially is we have a SharePoint 2013 search service backup file. This is the database, the admin database from the search service application. We don't upgrade the other 3 databases. We only need the search admin database. Now if you created the search admin database either using PowerShell or using the UI, then you're going to get the name of the search database without any additional markers, and I don't like that. So in this script, in my SQL script, when I do the restore, you'll notice that I'm using the underscore admin at the end. So that way I know that's the search admin database. So I'm just doing a simple rename here and restoring the one database to SQL Server. In this case, I'm using SQL Server 2016. And I'm doing a simple file rename so that I have my database in place. So this is just a backup of my SharePoint 2013 search admin database that's been renamed to my naming standard, which is SharePoint Service Search Admin. Then what we do is we go over to SharePoint. Now I'm on the central administration server from my farm. And what I have is a function that I created called restore search service application. And so this search service application restore simply ensures that the search instance is running on the server. And this one takes a little bit of time to turn itself online. So you want to make sure if you are going to script it that you have a while loop or a wait to wait for that service to come online. Otherwise the rest of your script just plain won't work. Once that service is online, then what I do is I get the local instance of the search service application, and then I create this thing that I call the search stub, and there's a reason for that I'll show you in just a sec. But this is going to be the name, the sort of the starting token for the name of all of my databases. Then I get the name of my service application as I want to see it in the UI, which is the Enterprise Search Service application. And then down here, instead of calling new search service application, you call the restore method. So this is the restore SP Enterprise Search Service application. We're going to pass in the name of that search stub. So the name attribute is going to be SharePoint underscore search service. And then of course we do the app pool and the database server. And then we pass in the admin database name. And that's the database that's going to get attached and upgraded as part of the search service creation. And then what I do is come back and I rename the search service application. And again, I'll show you why all this is, why I do this, because I found something out when I was doing my upgrade lecture, and that's that the names get messed up. Then we just create a search service application proxy, and we're off to the races. So down here, I'm going to just grab a couple variables for my search server and my SQL server, as well as my service application pool name, and then I'm going to run some PowerShell. And this is why I did the video, because this the restore method here took about 15 minutes on my farm, and this is just a simple little 4-server farm, and it takes about that long in the real there it goes. It'll take just a little bit of time to create. Okay, so once it creates the enterprise search service application, everything gets started and runs. And then what we should see is that it'll create it and it'll rename it, and we should have there we go. So now we're done. Once that's done, we're going to go into central administration and have a look at the search service application. So we're going to jump into central administration. I'm running central admin here on SSL. And we see that we are in a 2016 environment because we've got the big black bar across the top, which is the default new visuals. And so there's our enterprise search service application. And inside the enterprise search service application, once this lights up, you'll see that some of the settings were preserved, like the crawl account, but notice the contact email address was not preserved. So, you'll have to fix some of those or just script fixing them. The other issue we have is that in this new environment, since I'm still kind of in test mode, I'm using intranet 16 instead of intranet because I'm still testing it out. So I'm going to change that search center URL. But then notice that I have, under the search application topology, I just have the single server. And so that's what I mean when that the topology does not get upgraded. I just have the single server. And so we're going to fix that in the next demo. But we're going to check and make sure everything else worked, and sure enough, there are my content sources. Those got upgraded. Let's go down and look at the search schema, and the search schema, what I should be able to do is execute that same search I did before for DHT, for Doghouse Toys, and I should see some of those custom managed properties come back. So if I go in and look at DHT, you'll see that I have my custom managed properties. So this upgrade worked. It's running in SharePoint 2016, and if you remember, we only upgraded the one database. And so if I jump back over to, in just a second here, so you'll notice that there are the 4 databases down below: admin, analytics, crawl, and link store. And so it upgraded all of my databases, and now I have a nice name on that admin database so that it's _admin, whereas if you do it normally, you'll end up with just like SharePoint Search Service. So there's our admin database. Refresh the databases here, and I see that I've got all 4 of my databases upgraded. So that's the first step. We now have a search service application all created, configured, and upgraded. So when I first started working with this restore method, what I noticed is that if you pass in the name of the service application as you want it to appear in the UI, like if I use enterprise search service application here, then I end up with awful database names. So this is actually a screenshot from my very first attempt about 7 months ago, where there's my SharePoint Search Service database, the admin database that I upgraded without the admin stub on it, and then my 3 new databases named badly. Believe me, my DBAs hate it when there are spaces in the names of their databases because it means they have to do extra hoops when they're doing their backup scripts. So what you want to do instead is create that stub, which in our case was SharePoint _search service, and in our case we also did a we also added to the, hang on a sec, not supposed to go there, supposed to get a pen. We also added that _admin to our database name just to make it easier to see which one is the actual admin database. Then afterwards, we came back afterwards and we grabbed an instance of the search service application and we're using the name of the search stub. And then we just set the service application.name attribute to the actual name we want to see in the user interface. And then we call service application.update, and that will set the new name. So we kind of do it in 2 steps, and that gives us those pretty looking database names. Now the next step is to configure the service application topology. And so when it comes to considering the topology that you're going to use, with SharePoint 2016, you're faced with 2 questions, or 2 possible solutions. The first is using what we call traditional topology, or you can use the min role topology. Okay, so in SharePoint's terminology, traditional topology, or what we call streamlined topology, would be you would choose the server role custom, and then you would manage search yourself, just like you used to do in SharePoint 2013 and before. Search was up to you to decide where it runs. If you're going to use min role topology, then, oh, and by the way, you can go download, here's a bit.ly link. If you want to download some of the sample topologies from Microsoft, you can do that. This is just a link to one of the many documents that they have that look like this. Let's see if I've got that. There it is. These documents look like this, and you can go through and find the number of users that you're going to use, and you can find the guidance for scaling each server role. So that's streamlined topology. That's kind of what I tell my students. That's sort of the way we always used to do it. But now in SharePoint 2016, we have this option for min role. And so min role means that we can have a search server. We can also have an application server with search. So this is the view that you will have if you are running Feature Pack 1, which was introduced at Ignite a couple of weeks ago. And in this case, you have the choice of using search if you're using RTM bits. And after Feature Pack 1 rolls out, you'll be able to choose application with search. So this means that you can have dedicated servers that are running search, and it is up to the software now to decide what servers are supposed to be running. And so we can let the software manage itself. And if you want to learn more about the topologies and Feature Pack 1, there's an AKA down here that will get you all the information you want on Feature Pack 1. So I mentioned that when you do the configuration, so when we create a new farm, you have to pass in a local server role. So if you want a search server using min role, then you would specify local server role search. If you're connecting additional servers to the farm and you want them to be in min role status of search, then you simply pass in with the connect SP service, SP configuration database. You'll choose local server role search for that as well. So those are your 2 options if you're going to use min role assignments for search servers. Now in my case, I'm not using min role. I've got a 4-server farm, and the current min role topology doesn't work for my scenario because I need to mix my topology. So what I did is, let me get off that and get on the normal drawing mode, maximize that, do this and start this over. Okay, so where we are now is we're deciding we're going to run a 4-server topology with SharePoint. So I need to change from a single server topology to a 4-server topology. And as usual, I like to do this with a script. So it starts with a configuration script. In this configuration script, I have assignments for the admin server, the crawl server, the query servers, the index servers, the analytics server, and the content processing server. So these are the 6 roles that you need to account for when you're planning your SharePoint search topology. Then what we're going to do is we're going to run the script to build our topology. And there's a couple of different ways to do this. In my case, what I do is I grab that settings file. So we'll load up the PowerShell snap in, and then we'll grab the settings file. The settings file is going to create this config object that I can use throughout my script to figure out what my configuration is going to be. So if I just reference that config variable, you can see all the settings are in there. And then we're going to scroll down. There's some service application stuff in here that we're not going to need because our service application is already running. So I check and make sure that it's running, and it is. And then I come down and I just make sure that I've got a service application. You could cut all of this part out if you wanted to, because obviously we have a service application running, but I always say better safe than sorry. So this part simply checks to see that we've got a service application and a service application proxy, and we'll let those guys run and we're good. Then the next thing we do is I grab an instance, or I grab a variable that references the old search topology, and that's the search service application.active topology. So that's the single server topology that you saw in the UI just a moment ago. And then what I'm going to do, this is where there's a couple different ways you can go. You could, if you wanted to, call active topology.clone, and it would clone that current topology into my clone variable. It would actually create a second instance of that topology, and then you could go change that topology. But in my case, I am making such radical changes to the topology that I didn't want to have to run through a whole bunch of remove configuration items. I decided I'm just going to start over again. So in my case, I call new SP Enterprise Search topology, and when I do that, it creates a new empty topology that I can then go configure. Then we're going to grab the search service instance off the admin server, and then we can get started. So now what I'm going to do is create the first of those components, which is the admin component. And so in this case, I only have one admin component in my farm, so the code references just a single admin component. Then the next one, I could have many crawl servers in my farm. In this case, I only have one, but this script demonstrates how you would iterate through each of the crawl servers in the crawl server node and implement a crawl server. You'll also notice a pattern here. We start with a get SP Enterprise Search Service instance. That gives me the service instance of the server. So in this case, this is going to be my crawl server. I check to see if it's online, and if it's not online, then I do a start, and then I wait for it to start. Once that service is online, then I call new SP Enterprise Search whatever component. So in this case, it's a crawl component, but in the next one, you'll see there's a query component, an index component. And so you create the new SP Enterprise Search whatever component. You pass in the topology that you want to add it to, and then you pass in the search service instance so that it knows where to fire that up. So in this case, that was the search app, and that's only one crawl instance in our farm. But notice if I call the clone, I can do a component count here, and it will reference the number of components that are currently in that, and that's 2, one for the admin and one for the crawl. And then if I do components, it's actually going to enumerate each of the components in that topology. So I can see the server that it's running on and just do some verification that things are working the way I expect. Remember, all this time, none of this is online. This is all being handled offline. I also have instances of query servers, so again, you'll notice that I do a get, and then I check to see if it's online. If it's not online, I start the instance and I wait for it to start, and then I do new SP Enterprise Search, in this case query, processing component, and then I pass in the topology, the clone. So we get that up and running, and since this is a query server, we also make sure that we also ensure that the enterprise search and query and site setting service is started on those servers. The next one is index. Now index is a little tricky because you have to make sure, if you're going to move the index files, you have to make sure that the location of the indexes work, which means that you're potentially going to create file shares or paths on other servers. So of all of this little bit of PowerShell is a little tricky. But once we do that, we're going to create our index component on each of our index servers, which in our case is Search Web 1 and Search Web 2. And once we have that run, we do a get component count. We're up to 6 now because we've got our crawl servers and our query servers and our index servers taken care of. So now we're going to finally do the analytics processing component. Again, new SP Enterprise Search. It's the analytics processing component. And then finally, we're going to create the content processing component. And once that's done, we can now do a component count, and we see that we have 8 components in our search service application. So this is the part that takes time. Now that we've got the clone set up, we now call activate clone.activate. And what that's going to do is transfer the topology from the currently active topology of a single server over to the topology of 8 components running on 4 servers in our farm. And this is the part on my machines. This part took about 18 minutes. I'm not going to make you wait through that. This is all time-lapsed, so in just a second here it should say activated. And then what we have to do is decide if there's additional settings that we need to put in place. I have them all commented out because my settings are set up correctly. And then I have optionally, you can delete the old topology. Now, I don't always delete the old topology until I make sure that I know that it's running correctly, because all I have to do if my new topology doesn't work is activate the old topology and I'll be back to where I was. I'll be back to a clean working state. Then we open up the search service application and we're able to see the new search service application up and running. While that's doing that, let me check something here. I'm going to fire up my search farm. And what we hope to see here is we hope to see that we've got on our search app, admin and crawl, on our central administration machine, content processing and analytic processing, and then on our web servers we've got query processing and index partition. And so those are the 8 components that we created with our script. So now that all of that is working in our farm, we can go in, if we choose to, we can go in and check to make sure that our content sources are working. We can go in and we can actually start a full crawl. So since I only have one web application in this test farm, then I'm going to go ahead and edit the local SharePoint sites. Just for the sake of demo, I'm going to take out all these extra web applications and just leave the ones that work for my existing farm, since I'm doing this as a test. We'll choose OK there, and then we're going to kick off a full crawl. Once we're certain that the full crawl is working and we're finding content, then we're free to start crawls on other things like the customers and our www site. But once that crawl completes, we should be able to go ahead and execute a crawl. And so what I'm going to do is stop the video there, because I think all of that is just the demo that I'm going to go ahead and do live. So what I'm going to do now is switch over to my central admin server here, and we'll log in. Oh, yes it is. And so here we are in central admin, and I've run the crawls. So I've got 614 items in search, and if I look at my content sources, I've got my crawls are working. In fact, I can even go in and look at my crawl logs to verify that that the crawl logs are working, or that the crawl itself is working, and I'm verifying that I have content coming back the way that I expect. This means that I could return to search. I can execute a search in the search center. I'm going to use star just to return everything back to me and see how things go. And sure enough, I'm starting to see content coming back. I'm going to make sure my refinement works, and it appears that it does. If I go into PowerPoint, I'm able to see all of that. So that makes me happy. That means that my search worked. The other thing that I have is in my content sources, I have this line of business system called customers that I demonstrated to you earlier. And so it's using the BCS. It's using a custom connector to a customer database. And when we execute a full crawl for that, in the crawl logs, what we expect to see is a few extra records beyond the records from the database. So in this case, not only do I have the BCS profile pages coming back as search results, but I will also have URLs that start with BCS, and I'll see those in the log. But the way that I can test this is just jump over to customers. There's all my customers coming back. You'll notice the refinement worked because the site got upgraded. That's where the refiners are stored. All of these images are stored in the database, in the site, And then, of course, my hover panels are working as well. These addresses are being sent out to Bing and then being reverse geolocated so that I can see them there. I also have the metals, these little metal refiners. So if I come in here and choose silver, I'm able to see the silver. Oh, I don't want any updates. I'm able to see the refinement working, so my custom refiner is working. I can choose places from California who are gold, and everything is working the way I expect. So that is an upgrade not only of the search content, but it's also the search service application, because all the settings that are required to make that customer refinement work are all part of the search service application. So creating the new topology, you're going to call new SP Enterprise Search Topology and create that clone. And then for each component that you want to add, you're going to get an instance of the server where you want the service to be running. And then you'll call new SP Enterprise Search whatever component from one of those 6 search components. Pass in the search topology of the clone that you created earlier, and pass in the search service instance of the server instance where you want that running. And then you'll call clone.activate when you're done with the build. That will create your new search topology. Some things to think about when you're creating your search topology would be scale and load. There is no perfect search topology for every company, because you have to balance this notion of how many servers do I have and how many servers do I need to crawl the content that you crawl. And since everybody's going to be crawling different content and has different search requirements, you're going to need to manage this yourself. And so when you start thinking about using the streamlined topology approach, you want to look at resource consumption, and then where are you sharing traffic. Obviously, it'd be great if everybody could have 4 servers all to themselves for search and then everything else to run SharePoint. But that's not always viable financially. It's always not viable from a licensing perspective, or it may not even be required. So you have to decide this for yourself. But this is some guidelines that you can use. In my case, Neil Hodgkinson back in 2013 did some work around the performance of each of the components in search. So here we have admin, crawl, content processing, analytics processing, index, and query processing. And then he looked at the metrics for CPU, network, disk, and memory. And based on this notion of avoiding sharing critical resources and then splitting the bulk processing, things like content processing, away from query traffic, came up with the general recommendation of sharing content processing and analytics, admin and crawl, index and query. And that's, if you notice when we built out our farm, that's exactly what we did. We have the content processing and analytics processing running on our central admin server. We have admin and crawl running on the app server. And then we have index and query processing running on both of our web front ends so that we have some fault tolerance for our end users. Some additional topology considerations would be that you're going to run web servers and app servers as well as database servers. And if you use the guidance that I just showed you, you'll put admin and crawl on one server, you'll put analytics processing and content processing on another. And then you'll span query and index across your web servers. Now, if you have more than 20 million items, you'll need to create index partitions. And so when I talk about a scaled out SharePoint search environment, this is what I'm talking about. This is a fault tolerant, scaled search environment. But the problem is that this doesn't leave a lot of room for other services. So if you did this in SharePoint 2013, you might run into problems with performance on, say, Excel services or Excel calculation services. If you're running in 2016, you're going to want to look at the other service applications and the performance of those service applications and how they impact your search topology. In fact, what you may want to look at doing, and some of my larger customers are doing this, is they're moving to an environment where they actually just have a search tier. And so they have search servers They still have web and query off on their own, but they could also add query to that tier of search servers if they wanted to, add index to that tier for some degree of fault tolerance. But this is what you're looking at, is deciding how do you want to scale your environment out to this level of search for your company. You know, you want to decide how do you want to scale and what is the performance. The search service application produces some fantastic reports on where is it slow. If query is slow, scale query. If analytics is slow, scale analytics. But generally you're going to find you're either seeing bottlenecks at query, bottlenecks at content processing, or bottlenecks at crawl. And those are going to be the ones that you're going to want to pay attention to and the ones that you're going to want to scale. Looking at the questions before we get into closing thoughts, and I'm seeing Matthew sounds almost like Cortana. Reader text. Sorry that I sound automated. Don't mean to do that.
At least it's Cortana, not Siri.
Yeah, there you go. Yes, you can, Stephen. You'll get a copy of the deck. We'll send a link out when I'm all done. And excellent. Thank you for that, Dimitri. I appreciate that. So the main advantages, question is, will you cover any advantages of search in SharePoint 2016 compared to 2013? The main difference in SharePoint 2013 to 2016 is the scale of the index, is that they doubled the size of the index in SharePoint 2016. Everything else, all the other limits, currently published limits, are exactly the same as they were in SharePoint 2013. Okay, so some closing thoughts. When you're planning your upgrade, it does require some education. You should learn about the new capabilities. You should learn about what the new scale means for you, because it's possible that in SharePoint 2013, if you're running at scale, it's possible in 2016 you could potentially run fewer index partitions because of the size of the index or the scale and capability of the index in SharePoint 2016. There's also new features, so you're gonna want to manage the planning. You're going to want to practice, and the more you practice, the better you will get at doing these upgrades. Obviously, scripting helps. You should also learn about what else is new in SharePoint 2016. For example, Office Online Server is replacing Office Web App Server for your search previews, and I didn't show the search previews in here, but you'll need to connect to an Office Online Server and then perform a full crawl after you have done the created the WAPI binding. Once you've done a full crawl, then you'll start seeing your search previews. The other thing you'll want to learn about, because many of my customers are seriously evaluating the new Cloud Search Service application. What the Cloud Search Service application means is that you don't have to host indexing, content processing, or query on your local farm. All of the workloads for search, aside from crawl, are handled by Office 365. And so if you're interested in learning more about the search service, the Cloud Search Service application, there's some excellent resources available online, including a couple of search sessions recently from Ignite, and that would also be my friend Neil Hodgkinson. Some additional resources, some food for thought. Okay. Some additional food for thought. I am teaching a SharePoint 2013, SharePoint 2016 Admin Survival Camp on December 12th. We've got a few seats left. Also on February 6th, I'm teaching that same class. And in that class, we do a search module. We do a lot of other service applications and build out the entire farm, but search is definitely highlighted in that class. I also do building business solutions. If you're interested in how we did the customer refiner and the customer display template, we teach you how to do that in our Building Business Solutions class, along with a lot of other things. And as Ted mentioned, those February classes are currently 30% off if you sign up now. If you're interested in learning more about search, I do a class on Pluralsight called SharePoint 2013 Search Back to Front, where I walk through a lot of the topology conversation as well as how to script the build and script the updates of your search service application. And so you can get that through the bit.ly, bit.ly AB search, and that is case sensitive. I also just published, it just went live last month, Upgrading Your Farm to SharePoint 2016, where I review one of the slides earlier where I talk about the special considerations for different service applications and service application upgrade order. All of that is covered in that course. It's almost 4 hours of conversation around how to build out and upgrade a SharePoint 2013 to 2016 farm. And you can get there through bit.ly AB upgrade. And then in 2016, I'm going to be redoing and upgrading the 2013 search course into a SharePoint 2016 search course, and that's slated for early 2017 right now. The last couple questions in the queue. Let's see. The video will be made available later on. Ted showed the webinar landing page, and that's where you'll be able to get this video.
I think we'll follow up with everyone. We'll send out an email to everyone who's registered, and we'll have basically a link so you can go see the video as well, or send that to other people. And then Matt's going to compile all his materials and scripts from today into a single zip archive, and that link will also be in the follow-up email. Thanks, Ted. And then there's a question about SSRS reports. SSRS reports, from what I've seen, even if they're external, you could create a content source for those external reports. Make sure that the file types are managed in SharePoint, and then you can crawl them. You're only going to get file names, but it depends on what you're trying to do with those reports. And you can just email me a question if you like. Patching, you don't need to stop search, but for zero downtime patching, it's not a requirement. But you do need to have a fault-tolerant search if you want to maintain search throughout the entire upgrade cycle, because like all of the other components in SharePoint, search will not work unless you have live nodes. So if you want to have true zero downtime, you need to have redundant nodes for all of your search components as well, at least for query. I wouldn't worry so much about crawl, because while you're patching, you're not necessarily going to be crawling. But definitely for query, for your end users to be able to continue to do query, you'll need to have query and index available. Yes, you can ask questions offline. Actually, that'll lead me into my last slide, which is thank you guys. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate you attending and taking time out of your day. It makes me happy when I log in and see that people are actually showing up to the webinar. I know that we'll have the video available later, but I do appreciate folks coming in and taking time out of their day. So you can always reach me at matthew@aptalon.com. You can ping me on Twitter at MatthewMcD, and of course follow Critical Path at Critical Path. And I'll stick around after I shut off my mic, I'll stick around and answer some of the other questions just in text. But thank you guys very much. Have a great rest of your day.